So, Tanika.
Good afternoon, ACPS families, and thank you for joining us.
شكرا على الانضمام إلينا.
Before we get started, I will ask our interpreters to provide instructions to families for how to access the interpretation services so that all of our parents and family members who have joined us can participate in their preferred communication language. We will start with our Spanish interpreter.
Buenas tardes, bienvenidos. Para seleccionar español, por favor, cliquen en el globo y seleccionen español.
And we will follow with Amharic instructions.
እንደምን አረፈዳችሁ የኤስቢኤስ ቤተሰቦች እንኳን ደህና መጣችሁ። ዛሬ በዚህ ስብሰባ ላይ የትርጉምን ለምትፈልጉ በስፓኒሽ እና በአማርኛ እና በአረብኛ እየተሰጠን ያለው የአማርኛ ትርጉምን ለምትፈልጉ የዓለም ቅርጽ ያለበትን በመጫን አምሃሪክ የሚለውን በመምረጥ የአማርኛ ቋንቋ ትርጉም አገልግሎት ማግኘት ትችላላችሁ። በስልክ የምትጠቀሙ ደግሞ በስልካችሁ የላይኛው በኩል 3 ነጠብጣብ ያሉበትን በመጫን ቋንቋውን መርጣችሁ መጠቀም ትችላላችሁ። Thank you.
And finally, instructions in Arabic, please.
صباح الخير، أنا علي مترجم عربي. إذا أردت الاستماع إلى الترجمة باللغة العربية اذهب إلى مربع الكرة الأرضية في أسفل الشاشة اضغط على زرار المربع واختار اللغة العربية. شكرا.
Dr. Hutchings, the floor is yours.
And thank you so much. And I just want to welcome everybody today to our second community session that is for our community and families. And we had a lot of engagement last night, or a lot of people in tune who tuned in for our community meeting this past evening. And I'm hoping that we'll have a good number of folks join us today. Hopefully you're getting an opportunity to have a lunch break or some kind of break in the middle of the day. I'm sure everybody's at home and some of you may be in the office depending on your job. But today we have a lot of information in store to share with you. We want to be able to provide you all with some insight to our progress in regards to reopening our schools. We are going to hear from our director of the Alexandria Health Department, Dr. Steve Herring, to provide us with some updates on our community spread, as well as some of our community health metrics and information regarding our community health metrics. We're going to hear from our Chief of Staff, Dr. Steve Wilkins, who will provide an overview of the intent to return form that we administered to our staff a couple of weeks ago, and just to share some insight in regards to that information. We're also going to hear from Dr. Terry Mazingo, who is our Chief of Teaching, Learning, and Leadership, and she's going to share some information about the hybrid learning models that we have explored and that we'll be using as we transition our students back into our school buildings. And then we're going to hear from Dr. Alicia Hart, who is our Acting Executive Director of Facilities and Operations, who will be sharing some of the health and safety mitigations that we put in place in our school buildings to ensure that our buildings are safe and ready for our staff as well as our students when we transition into our reopening. So before we begin, I just want to thank each and every one of you. I know that it has been very difficult being at home with your children, or having situations where your children are in some form of childcare, which fortunately we have community partners who have afforded us the opportunity for our families to have some childcare services throughout the day. But I just want to thank you all for the grace and the patience that you have had during this particular time. I mean, who would have thought that we would be still in this global pandemic? Now it's December, close to the winter break, and we are still virtual. And we would have never imagined this back in the summer when we were planning to transition after the first quarter to still be in this predicament. But our team is continuing to work tirelessly to ensure that we are prepared when it is time for us to pivot to in-person. So I want to go ahead and get started with our presentation. Let's go to the next slide. And I want to begin with our health metrics because I think this is a very important area for us to start with. This is one of the reasons why we are one of the indicators that we use to determine when it is appropriate for us to return to in-person. I'm going to have our director of the Alexandria Health Department, Dr. Herring, to go through these metrics specifically with our community, and then we're going to get into some other components of our presentation. So Dr. Herring, take it away.
Good afternoon, Dr. Stephen Herring, Director of Alexandria Health Department. I appreciate everybody being here, and I appreciate the partnership that the Health Department has with the school system. So this first metric and second metric and third metric, these are the core indicators that the Centers for Disease Control has provided for communities to use, and they're calling this the dynamic school decision making. And it's dynamic because these metrics are always changing. This first metric, the number of new cases per 100,000 in the past 14 days, is actually at the highest risk of transmission. The CDC has provided 5 different categories, and the categories are lowest risk, lower, moderate, higher, and highest. And this level that we're at right now, to get into the highest risk category, you actually would have 200 or more cases per 100,000. And Alexandria currently is at over 400. So we're more than double the number of cases that it would take to be in that highest risk of transmission within the school setting. The second metric has to do with the percent positivity in the past 14 days. And for this particular metric, Alexandria is at the moderate risk level, a level 3, if you will, on 1 through 5, 5 being the worst. Those are metrics that are community-wide. And the third metric, on the other hand, has more to do with the school system, the school and the school system. It's things they have under control. And while this isn't reported on the websites, I can tell you that working with the Alexandria City Public Schools since last spring and knowing all the work they've done this summer and this fall, that they would be in a green category. They would be at the lowest risk because their plans include following all 5 of these mitigation strategies. And I won't get into those specifically unless there's any questions regarding those. Again, these are the core indicators. There's also some secondary indicators that would also indicate that there is moderate to higher risk of transmission. The other thing that we look at from the health department and we share with the superintendent is what is going on regionally, what is going on within Northern Virginia. In all of Northern Virginia, not just the city of Alexandria, is at substantial activity of transmission. VDH ranks these transmission levels at 5 different categories, and this is the highest level. What this indicates is something I think we all know, and that is diseases, communicable diseases, do not follow jurisdictional boundaries. People live, work, learn, worship in different jurisdictions. And what we're seeing in Alexandria in terms of these highest risk, moderate risk categories are true throughout the region. So that's it for my presentation, unless you have any clarifying points, Dr. Hutchings.
Thank you, Dr. Herring. And one thing I do want to just remind all of our participants today that please use the chat section to put in questions or comments that you may have, because we will have time to answer some of the questions that come through. So Dr. Herring, I appreciate the fact that you were able to talk through these health and safety metrics. In particular, I want to just point out the fact that, these metrics really help us with our reopening planning and some of the guidance that we have received from the Virginia Department of Health. One in particular has helped us with determining, whether our schools should remain open at this particular time. And that area deals with the number of new cases within the community. We are at the highest risk of transmission, as Dr. Herring had mentioned, and a part of the Virginia Department of Health, and we have to use multiple factors. So we're not just looking at you know, the fact that the number of new cases is at the highest risk, but we also have to put into account that we have staff members who come from all over the Northern Virginia region. So they're coming from areas that it's not just, you know, their high risk area for the number of new cases. We have some staff who are coming from areas that have percentages of COVID-19 positivity rates that are higher than the city of Alexandria. And we have to put all of that into consideration. But what the Virginia Department of Health is saying is that when you have indicators that are at the highest risk of transmission, they're asking for us to consider remote learning should be considered as the primary method of instruction. They're also asking that if at the highest risk of transmission, to limit in-person instruction as much as possible, to eliminate or to limit extracurricular activities that are not for the purpose of providing childcare. So our childcare centers, it's different standards in regards to that, because we know that that is a necessity at that particular point in time. To cancel any social activities and gatherings that are not part of providing regular school services. And also for the childcare for working families, that they can operate in the schools, but they should be limited to children that are in the local geographical area. So not having multiple geographical areas, meaning, you know, students from Maryland and DC, part of these programs are coming from a local geographic area. And then finally, the strongly encouraging everyone to use face coverings. And that is for any persons that are in our school buildings. And for these reasons, and with this guidance from the Virginia Department of Health, was one of the reasons why we made the decision to defer our transition of additional students. We were supposed to transition students in this past Monday on November 30th. And because we are experiencing this highest risk of transmission, we had decided to defer that. And we're going to talk a little bit more around what the revised phased reentry plan looks like. So with that said, let's go to our next slide. And I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Hart to share some of the health and safety mitigations that we are taking into consideration and putting into place for the return of our students in our school buildings.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hutchings. And so what's shown on the screen right now is just an example of a classroom setup, and really wanting to point out the social distance of the desks being 6 feet apart, as well as the sneeze guard. And that is an added measure that we are using within our schools to help with mitigation of the spread or potential spread of COVID-19 when we return back to the class. Next slide, please. This is just an example of a social distancing marker that will be in schools. This includes floor decals and wall signage that really just helps reinforce the social distancing that will have to take place within the facilities. It is very, clear, easy to read and understand signage and markers. And along with the markers, just a continuation of robust communication to make sure that our students and our staff understand when they come back into the buildings, they will look a little different. But again, we are doing everything that we can to help reinforce the message of making sure we are appropriately socially distanced. Next slide, please. Another example of social distancing, and this is in a particular hallway, to include floor decals and arrows, directional arrows, to help those, particularly our younger students, understand the direction of travel that they should take in the hallways. And the cones are there to help with the separation, again, of making sure that we can maintain the appropriate social distancing within our school facilities. And prior to moving on to Dr. Wilkins, also want to speak briefly about our HVAC, process that we have been implementing really since March. We have continued on with our preventative maintenance of our HVAC systems, to include changing filters and just to make sure that they are in the best operational
that they are operating in the way that they should be operating, to include, appropriate indoor air quality flow, filtering out of particulates and particles as well. So just wanting to make sure that I could speak specifically to the HVAC, because I know that that is in general another concern of those that are returning back to buildings. And so now if we can move to the next slide, and I will turn it over to Dr. Wilkins, Chief of Staff.
Thank you, Dr. Hart, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll cover the purpose of the intent to return form and the feedback from the staff and teachers. And I should say from the start that the purpose of this form was to gather information from our staff. Right? We cannot just ask staff to come back to schools without understanding and appreciating the challenges that we all face at work and home. We care about our staff, and we want to know how the staff is managing their work-life balance in this pandemic health situation. And we wanted to hear from all our staff, all 2,600 ACPS staff. So on November 9th, the superintendent, via 2 live video sessions, informed the entire division of our goal to hear from the staff about their feedback on their work-home experience. And this information would be used to help us make staffing plans to support in-school instruction. Of course, we completed that survey. I'll talk a little bit more about the data in the next slide. And this effort will be followed by a family choice form so that we can gather information from the families and the students about their ability to send their students back to in-class instruction. Next slide, please. So what were the staff results? This slide shows the division-wide or all staff feedback. And of the 2,600 staff, approximately 55% reported being able to return in person. This pie chart shows the remaining 45% of total staff who stated they would not be able to return due to impacts of the public health situation. And I will read the slide just for clarity. But going clockwise, the chart shows for those staff who were not able to return, 5.2% said they were age 65 or older, 21% for underlying medical conditions, 10.2% for at risk for complications, including pregnancy or weakened immune system, 15.5% for caring for a family member with underlying medical conditions, 11.5% for those with childcare challenges due to closures of childcare facilities due to COVID-19, 31.1% who expressed fear and anxiety of the workplace, and another remaining 5.5% who provided other reasons for not being able to return to work. We then looked at teachers. Next slide, please. So looking at our teachers, of our 1,290 classroom teachers, 691 or approximately 55% said they would be able to return. This is the light gray portion that you see in these pie charts. So at the elementary level, 57.5% are able to return. Middle school level, 54.3% are able to return. And at the high school level, 51.2% are able to return. This concludes my portion of the briefing. I will be followed by Dr. Terry Mozingo, who is our Chief of Teaching, Learning, and Leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkins, and good afternoon, everyone. At this time, what I'd like to do is to provide you an overview of the instructional, different instructional models, and as well as what we are considering as the best instructional model for our school system and our students and families. What you will see on this slide is 3 bookmarks. There's a green one and a red one and a blue one. The green one refers to the traditional 100% in person. That is the model that we know, we're all accustomed to. So I'm not going to spend time explaining that particular model. But what I do want to do is to explain a little bit about the hybrid in-person virtual model. What that actually means in many cases is that children would be in school on certain days in the school, and then they would be at home learning virtually. And I'll tell you more about that when I get to the next slide. But here are some points, some advantages of the hybrid in-person virtual. It does provide a sense of safety, a sense of connection, as students and teachers will be back in our school buildings on select days. It provides a sense of personal relationships because students will have, as I said earlier, direct access to teachers, to counselors and others, and the teachers have access to students. But there are 6 points that are critical for consideration when implementing the hybrid in-person virtual model. We will still be required to maintain 6 feet social distancing. Staff and students will determine the number of days, and that's based upon the staff survey and the some of what Dr. Wilkins just described, as well as the family choice form that you will hear more about later. There's also a high commitment to levels of learning. There will be an expectation though for wearing a mask and washing your hands, and kids taking temperatures, using common spaces. We will have to adhere to all of those requirements. In this virtual hybrid model, it may or may not be possible for students to have the same teachers. In addition to that, they will have access to their counselors, again, because they're in school, and there will be a focus on social and emotional learning. Now, the last bookmark, kind of the light blue one, is really about 100% virtual learning. And that means 4 days a week, virtually learning at home, similar to what is occurring now. We are in the process, obviously, of defining that more, but the virtual learning is not in school, but at home learning. And it does provide a lower health risk, again, because students are at home. On the next slide, I want to take a minute to just further define the hybrid learning. So what you see here are some different options. Again, hybrid learning means that students are in school, in person with the teacher and others on select days, and they're at home virtually learning. On the left side of this slide, you will see that there are different options for a hybrid learning model, whether it's in person for 2 weeks or virtual for 3 weeks, or in person AM, or those half days AM or PM. But what we know is that those 2 models create many limitations for our school division. There are challenges with those 2, particularly with transportation. There are challenges with the continuity of instruction and in reducing the academic loss. And they also pose challenges with too many transitions. So what we are working towards and considering and wanting to implement would be the in-person 2 days and virtual 3 days. That is the model that we are considering. That is the model that we feel and we know is most feasible and most appropriate for those families who make a decision to return to hybrid learning. You'll learn more about that, but I just wanted to again just highlight that the last 2 options are not feasible for our system, but in-person 2 days, virtual 3 days, which is at home, we feel like those are the best days that we can for our students and our families. Thank you so much. And I'll turn it over to our superintendent.
So I want to provide just a quick overview of our revised phased entry plan. And as I stated earlier, we were anticipating having additional students return this past Monday, November 30th. But due to the community spread and the spike in regards to now being at the highest risk of transmission, we decided to defer our transition of students. So this provides specific dates. You know, our previous plan had January and February, so it was a little more general. We wanted to be more specific on the dates and the actual student groups who will be re-entering our school buildings when feasible. So when you look at January the 19th, we're looking to transition our students with disabilities in grades K2 who are enrolled in our citywide special education program. We're looking to expand the student body on January 26th to students with disabilities in grades 3 through 5 who are part of citywide, early childhood special education students, and students with disabilities in grades K5 who receive self-contained language arts and self-contained math or both, as well as our English learners in grades pre-K through 5. On February 2nd, we're going to be expanding to our students with disabilities in grades 6 through 12 who are part of our citywide program and who are also receiving self-contained either language arts or math. and then also extending our English, extending to our English learners in grades 6 through 12. On February the 9th, we will expand to all of our remaining pre-K through 5 students that are able to return. And on February 16th, all of our remaining students through 12th grade to return. So the goal is by the end of February to have all students pre-K through 12 who are able to return back into our school buildings to be back in our schools. Now we have to keep in mind this is all contingent upon 3 major aspects. One is staffing, the other is building capacity, and then finally the health or community health metrics that we described at the beginning of today's presentation. This is all contingent on that, and we're going to have to be prepared to pivot either way. We may be in a re-entry, and we may have to pivot back to a virtual at some point in the future, and we're going to have to be always prepared to do that and make sure that our families are constantly thinking about preparation to either be in that virtual setting or the hybrid approach. So now we want to really get to the questionings. Before we do that, I do want to talk about one final thing, and that is our family choice. Can you go to that next slide, please? Because this is the reason why we are here today, wanting to give you all this insight. We are going to conduct a family choice form, and this is available in PowerSchool. Families are going to be able to complete this form between Wednesday, which is today, December 2nd, and next Friday, December 11th. If you do not currently have a PowerSchool account, directions and information regarding this is going to be sent out this afternoon to help guide you through how to set up your account. If you still need assistance, we do also have a helpline that will be able to help our families who are having difficulty accessing the PowerSchool and accessing this family choice form. Now, some of the key takeaways from today that you're going to need to be able to complete this form is the fact that we are going to be transitioning students back into our school buildings in January through February. So that's one key takeaway. We are going to have a hybrid learning approach that allows students to be in our schools in person for 2 days per week, and we'll have virtual for 3 days per week. So that's another key point for you. We have taken the appropriate health and safety precautions in our school buildings, meaning that we have our desks that are 6 feet apart. We also have personal protective equipment, also known as PPE, available to all of our staff and students if needed. That we are following all of the CDC and adhering to all of the CDC guidelines in regards to social distancing and cleaning protocols and contact tracing and all of the health mitigations that we have put into place. And that all of this is still contingent upon the staffing, the building capacity, and the community health metrics. So with that information, we want you to make a choice around if your child will be able to return back to our schools at the designated time from the timeline that we shared with you. And we're hoping to hear from you really soon. We really need this information in order to finalize our hybrid schedules so that we can begin to assign our students. And one key point I think that's important for everyone to know, and I'm sure it's going to come up in the Q&A today, we are going to do everything that we can to keep our students assigned to their teachers, but it is not a guarantee that 100% of our students will be in that situation. And 100% of our staff will be in that situation. But we know that having a disruption like going to a different teacher, especially this late in the game, because we're talking now after the first semester, so that's well into the second half of our school year, it's just not going to be the best practice. So we want to adhere to trying to keep our students with their current teachers, but we want to provide the disclaimer that, you know, it's no guarantee that 100%. We're going to try to have every student in that situation, but you know, there could be unforeseen circumstances and things that could occur that will prevent us from being able to do that. So I don't want to guarantee 100% at this point, but we are going to do everything within our power to have all of our students remain with their current teachers. All right, so let's go right into our questioning. Question one, this is for Dr. Mozingo. How are teachers planning to assist students one-on-one during in-person while also maintaining 6-foot distancing? And also, how will students be able to see a student's work? Or how will they be able to see a student's work, excuse me?
So thank you for asking that question. I wanted to begin by saying, this is all very new for all of us and very, very different. And in many of these areas, we are still going to have to provide teachers some guidance and some support on how to achieve that. I know that our schools will still have, the virtual office hours, so that will still for parents and students. So we will still make sure that that time is available. The other is, though, we're going to have to work with our teachers and probably doing this simulation activity to probably give them some guidance on how to provide that level of support and feedback at a distance. Dr. Herring, I don't know if there's any comments in that area that you could provide in terms of guidance for teachers once students return to school.
I'm sorry, your clarifying question was?
Once they return to an in-person model. So they return to an in-person model, they are in the classroom and the teacher has the PPE, wearing the mask, and then they have a student that needs some support. And normally they go up. So they want to try to figure out how we can still provide that level of feedback and support.
Right, our recommendation will be that that support be minimized. And it's the recommendations we're making to businesses, for instance, and that you minimize the closeness, the within 6 feet, to the max, or to the minimal amount of time that is required, and then you step back to the 6 feet. Am I fully answering your question?
Yes, and I think in addition to what you're saying, Dr. Herring, I think just to because I want to get to our next question, I think a part of that is just making sure, and Dr. Herring has spoken to this earlier, the 6 feet apart is important, but we will have opportunities where there are spaces in the classroom which are still 6 feet apart, but that the teacher can still provide some guidance to that student. We have sneeze guards at our desk as well. Now we're still maintaining the 6 feet distancing, but it's just operating in a different way. But we still want to be able to provide students with those types of supports as we are transitioning back into our schools. The next question is, why can so many other public school systems in the US, often in areas with higher infection rates, provide some in-class schooling for all students, including high schoolers, and ACPS cannot? And I'll take that question because, I can't speak for the other school divisions across the country, but I can tell you that we are following the Virginia Department of Health guidelines, especially with the high risk transmission rates that we currently have, right, or the highest risk transmission rates that we currently have. We're following those guidelines. We work in collaboration with the Alexandria Health Department as well with our decision making, and we're trying to make sure that we adhere to all of the guidelines that have been laid out from the CDC. So with that in mind, that is what is preventing us from having the in-schooling at this particular time, but we're just really trying to maintain those guidelines to keep the health and safety of our staff and students as a priority. So I can't speak for the other school divisions, but that is why we have not been able to do our in-class schooling as of right now. But we do have to keep in mind, we started that process a few weeks ago, and we had some students who were in our, so a very small number, but we did have some in-school or some in-person schooling occurring. And because of the community spread that has happened just recently, the spike in that is what triggered for us to delay some of our in-person learning. So next question deals with what is the protocol for a child going to the bathroom during lunch? Will they need to walk closely past other children not wearing masks at their desk? And Dr. Hart, can you answer that?
Absolutely. So this is a great question. And one thing that we do want to continue to point out is during the time where children are eating or students are eating, they will have to have their mask off. If a student needs to get up and use the restroom during that time, what my recommendation would be, and of course I'll ask Dr. Herring to weigh in on this to make sure that I'm correct, is for that student to put on their face mask before they start to walk around the classroom, because really that is what it's going to be, that layer of protection as they are having to circulate to get to the restroom and to come back to their desk. I do want to point out, as we are doing our field verifications and our actual setups of classrooms on site, this is one of the points that my team and I continue to take into consideration, is that students and individuals are not discrete points. We have to consider the fact that there will be movement in the classroom throughout that day, and we're making sure that our desk and our furniture is appropriately distanced to be able to accommodate for that consideration as well. Dr. Herring, I'm not sure if there's anything else you would like to add.
No, just I would reiterate that point of, we would expect and hope that students would wear the mask correctly and consistently. And that means when they're not eating or drinking, that they need to have their mask on. Same for staff.
Thank you, Dr. Hart and Dr. Herring. So Dr. Herring, this question is for you. Is the school system going to mandate vaccines before entering in the 2-day in-person sessions? Or will there be any mandates, even from that you're hearing, for all students or all staff to have vaccinations done prior to coming back?
I'm actually hearing specifically that there will not be a requirement for vaccinations for COVID-19. I think everybody knows there are requirements for other vaccinations according to Code of Virginia, but for the COVID-19, it's not going to be a requirement. It's something that I'm highly recommending as the health director, and I'm going to get it. I'm recommending it to others, but it will not be mandatory or a requirement.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Herring. So the next question is, will students who choose hybrid remain at their home school, and will students remain with their students? And I spoke to this earlier, that we're going to try to keep our students with their classrooms and with their assigned teachers currently. That is the goal, to try to keep them together. In regards to their homeschool, initially, and I think this came from when we initially spoke with our board, excuse me, we had talked about the potential of using other schools for building capacity concerns. But because we are looking at bringing all students pre-K through 12 back into our school buildings, that we will not have other schools that will be available. So we are trying to keep our students in their home schools throughout this process. The next question is, will students who are currently attending ACPS Virtual Plus community partner sites still be able to continue studying there under a virtual model? Excuse me. So that's for Dr. Mozingo, or I don't know if Mr.
Huffman.
Is Mr. Huffman on here? I think he is.
I think Mr. Huffman is here. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, I'm here. We're currently working with our Virtual Plus partners in whatever hybrid system is potentially established. We are working with those partners to continue that after school or school day childcare program through that system.
Thank you, Mr. Huffman. So what is, and let me go down to the next question. I'm trying to filter all these questions. So will teachers be doing live virtual lessons while teaching at school for those who are virtual at the time? Or children who stay 100% virtual, will they have a new teacher but the same class minus the hybrid? Okay, so I think the question here is, are we going to have students learning, while you have some students in person and some students virtual, are they going to be conducted through concurrent teaching, meaning there's one teacher teaching both of them? Or are we going to have a situation where kids who are virtual will have one teacher, kids who are in person will have a different teacher, which may require them to switch teachers?
So
Yes,
thank you so much for asking that question. And I want to say it's all the above, right? Because we're actually in the process of making some decisions. If the concurrent instructional model is chosen, that could be that the teacher is teaching the same group of students, and one group of students is in the classroom, the other group of students are learning virtually. So if that instructional model is chosen. So I think that answers that question at its core.
and some of the conversations that we are having right now with our staff around the concurrent teaching is the fact that, you know, concurrent teaching will allow for us to have less disruptions in regards to our students, meaning that if we're conducting concurrent teaching, we're not forced to change the student from that classroom and assign them to a new teacher, you know, well into the school year. But we're still working through all the logistics of the actual teaching delivery or instructional delivery. And concurrent teaching is an instructional delivery model that we're working through right now. But more information will be coming out about that, how we're delivering instruction over the next week. The next question deals with what has changed to prompt reopening conversations now. Transmission rates are the highest they've ever been. So we've been talking about reopening since July. So this is not a new thing for us. We've had community meetings in August. We've had sessions with the board as well, beginning in October, and we've been meeting every 2 weeks publicly. We also have weekly sessions that are recorded for anybody to watch and to review. So these conversations have been ongoing for the entire time we've been in the global pandemic. What we are asking now for is, as we're getting closer to the reopening dates, we need to solidify what students are able to return, the same as we had to solidify what staff were able to return. And let me give you an example. We did surveys back in September to get a feel of how many students and how many staff members were going to come back. But that gave us ballpark figures that allowed us to come up with some planning, but it wasn't based on, you know, definitive numbers or more accurate numbers like we're doing now. And this has been a part of the process the entire time. We're just refining our practice and getting more information as we move along. If we would have gotten all this information back in even October, and think of just how things have changed since then, the data would not have been reliable for us to transition into a reopening like we're planning to do next month. The next question is, how can we live in a community that professes educational equity goals, but have created an environment when only children of wealthy people and those, hold on, where only children of wealthy people and those who abandon public schools can receive in-class instruction? So, you know, I think that is it's a good question. It's an interesting question, because us professing educational equity is something that we do stand by, racial equity being the heart of our work. I'm trying to understand how this decision in regards to us being in person and not being in person falls into, you know, the wealthy and those who can abandon public schools. Specifically, what we are striving to do is we're trying to make sure that we follow all of the CDC guidelines, the Virginia Department of Health guidelines that they have provided us, in collaboration with the Alexandria Health Department, to determine when it is most feasible for us to open as a school division. I can't really speak for any of the other entities in this area, but those are the guidelines that we use. And in addition to that, we have to look at our staffing and our building capacity. And we definitely want our students back as soon as feasible. And we're going to keep working towards making that happen. The next question is there a set guide for what dictates whether ACPS opens, closes the schools for each of the 3 metrics? And Dr. Herring, you may want to talk a little bit about those community metrics. I know you shared about them earlier, and I can talk to how we follow them.
So there are there's the community metrics that we talked about before, the core metrics of the amount of transmission and the percent positivity. Then there are secondary indicators. And what the Virginia Department of Health has done is they've given guidance about mitigation measures related to the level of community transmission. And so when one matches where the community's at according to the current indicators, then you can crosswalk what Virginia Department of Health is recommending in terms of teaching, in terms of schooling.
And what we take from that is we're following some of the considerations that the Virginia Department of Health has given us. So for example, when we're at the highest risk of community spread, which is like right now, so we're in the red right now, there's some specific guidelines that the Virginia Department of Health has asked us to consider as a school division, and that is to consider remote learning at that particular time, to consider limiting any social interactions or social gatherings at that particular time, to only allow for community partners that may be using our schools for childcare needs, and keeping those childcare needs solely on the local geographical area, are just some of the considerations that the Virginia Department of Health are providing us. So we're using those guidelines to assist with our reopening. We also are putting into consideration the staffing component and the building capacity component as well. But we are really using our community health metrics to guide some of our decision-making throughout this process. The next question is, with cases expected to be on the rise over the next 3 months, aren't we realistically looking at opening closer to March or April? And this is Dr. Herring in regards to the rise.
Right, and you know, a lot of the models that we've looked at, it's interesting because we've had modeling from multiple different academic institutions and think tanks since May, and the modeling is actually it's speculative, if you will. It helps to inform, but it's not always accurate, because if we go back and look at what the models were saying in May and June and July, it didn't always pan out the way it is. It's right that there's current estimates that this could continue to rise, particularly if people don't restrain behaviors over the coming holidays. And so we're prepared from that from a public health standpoint. Yet, on the other hand, I believe from my interactions with the schools, what they're doing is they're preparing in case there are additional mitigation strategies that are implemented society-wide. For instance, we don't know what else, what other amendments to executive orders might be forthcoming, for instance, that might help to mitigate the community-wide transmission.
So Dr. Herring, I think what I hear is that there's so many different indicators and possibilities that it's hard to make an inference that March or April is going to be the time frame, because there are things that we can do to mitigate this, to allow for the curve to flatten sooner than later. Is that an accurate statement?
That's absolutely correct, yes.
So thank you. We're going to move on to the next question for Dr. Hart, and this is, how can we ensure air is filtered? The virus spreads best indoors by airborne particles, and are we installing HEPA HEPA filters and to improve the air filtration within our buildings?
Thank you, Dr. Hutchings. So what the team has been doing is making sure that we are working hand in hand with our contractor, continuing on with our preventative maintenance, changing filters to include MERV 13 filters and some of our systems that do accommodate that type of filtration, as well as going through our work order system and identifying if there are any current or outstanding work orders that are related to indoor air quality, so we can address those particular HVAC issues well before children return into the facility. So that's really what I would like to just stress, is that even pre-pandemic, it was an intense focus on making sure that our HVAC systems work properly. There have been a few upgrades at some of our schools that were already pre-planned per the ongoing CIP program. So we've been doing various things, but again, our focus is to make sure that all of our systems are operational, functioning appropriately, so they can do the filtration that they are designed to do.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. Another question for you, Dr. Herring, in regards to the CDC guidelines. Are the CDC guidelines open to interpretation? And because how were private schools in Alexandria operating in a hybrid model successfully?
So I would say that it depends on exactly what aspect of the guidelines we're talking about. as to whether they're open to interpretation or not. Those first two metrics, it's very clear that there's demarcations between being lower risk, lowest risk, lower risk, moderate, higher, or highest risk. Because the indicators, and this is on the VDH public website, are very clear about where a community would fall. I think where there is more interpretation is the third metric, and that's the mitigation strategies that a school or school system can implement. And I have said before that my interpretation of what I'm seeing with ACPS is that they would be in the green category. They would be in the lowest risk of transmission for that one metric when I see their plans for the consistent and correct use of masks, for their social distancing, the hand hygiene, what they've told me about their cleaning and disinfection, and of course the collaboration that they have with the health department's school team. One of the things that could be considered open for interpretation would be social distancing to the largest extent possible. And I've been very clear to all the schools that the recommendation from Alexandria Health Department is to maintain the 6 feet of distancing, because if people are within 6 feet and there's somebody who's ill, all those close contacts immediately have to go on quarantine for the full quarantine period. In terms of the second part, how are private schools operating successfully? I can't answer that directly. I do know we have had one outbreak in a private school. This is, on the public site, but I can't answer that directly. What I do is I provide the guidance and the recommendations that are being issued both from the Centers for Disease Control and Virginia Department of Health.
Yeah. And I think it just goes back to what I had mentioned earlier, that it is our responsibility to really just follow the guidance as well as the health data that is shared with us and to make decisions, to the best of our ability based on that information. And that's what we're doing in Alexandria City Public Schools. So the next question, and Dr. Crawford may be able to help us here. My daughter has asthma and I cannot send my child in person. Will I need to withdraw her from the public school system for the time being if in person will become mandatory? Dr. Crawford, she might have been, I thought she was on here, she may not be. So let me just, I'll answer that on her behalf, is no, no one would need to withdraw any student due to an illness like asthma. So that is not something that you would be required to do. If we go to in person, then what you would do is you would, on your form, the family choice form, you would opt for virtual and just have your child receiving their instruction virtually versus through in person. But no, we will not require students to withdraw from any public school entity because of an illness like asthma. So we're going to go to the next question. This is for Dr. Mozingo. What will middle and high school look like? Will the students stay in one class or switch classes? And will students keep the same teachers they have now?
Okay, so I'll answer that question beginning with the end. The second part, we are not certain. I think we said earlier in terms of whether students will have the same teachers or not. I know that schools will do everything possible for that to happen, but we are not able to promise that at this time. In terms of classes, again, the classes will be smaller, but there will be occasions that you will have to switch classes. Good example might be we just had this discussion with the middle school principal today though, but you may be in a classroom for your core subject, literacy or algebra or geometry, but you might have to switch to another class for encore. But remember, you will still be held accountable for the social distancing requirements, wearing the mask, and those classroom sizes the classes will be smaller. But there will be an opportunity. There will be some occasions where you will have to transition to other classes, but still adhering to all of those safety requirements.
Yes. So yes, students will continue to switch classes, but they will adhere to social distancing and wear face coverings. So the next question is, would my child have the same teacher for both in-person and virtual? And I answered that question earlier today, that we're going to try to keep our students together and try to keep the same teachers with those students. However, we can't 100% guarantee that that is going to happen, because there are other factors that can contribute to that change. But we are trying to do everything within our power to keep our students with their current teachers as we transition into our in-person. Dr. Herring, a question for you. Why isn't the district considering utilizing a widespread or mass periodic testing? I'm sorry, I just lost my thing.
Widespread testing regimen, I think, or regime.
Hold on, wait, my
regime.
My chat box, I can't see that question. Can you all see that?
Yes, and so the question is, why is the school system not considering mass periodic testing regime as other educational institutions are doing? We're not recommending that on a regular basis. We might recommend it on some specific situations. For instance, if there were some possible contacts to a known confirmed case. But testing itself actually doesn't prevent the spread of the infection. And I think the classic example that I can give is at the end of September, no time since sometime at the beginning of the summer, can you get on White House grounds without getting tested? And at the end of September, there was a ceremony, and everybody got tested, everybody was negative, and that turned into a super spreader event because they did not practice the mitigation strategies that were recommended by public health. People were not wearing their face masks, they were within 6 feet, and it's a well-known super spreader event. So our emphasis has been that people really need to maintain the 6 foot of distance. They need to stay home when they're sick. They need to wear a face mask, need to wash their hands, and practice respiratory etiquette. Those are the answers to addressing the risk of transmission.
Okay, I know that we are coming to an end, so I'm going to do one final question. And the question is, if I decide to not send my kids to school and they continue to learn online, will they receive the same support as in person? And how will this be done? So Dr. Mozingo, if a student remains online, will they receive that same kind of support that they receive in person?
So I would answer it like this: if you remain at home learning virtually, the student will still receive the virtual support. And so I would love to know a little bit more about what is being asked. But if you're asking about counselor support or office hours for the parents or for students to check in with their teachers, or if you're asking about intervention time or enrichment or one-on-one support, that level of support will still continue as part of the virtual environment. The only difference is that the students that are in person will have that support in person, but virtually you will still have that level of virtual support in those areas that is occurring now.
Yes, and just to reiterate, Dr. Mozingo, and thank you for clarifying that, we want to ensure that students who are virtually still have the access and still are receiving the necessary social, emotional, and academic support. So that's whether, like you said, the psychologist or social worker or an interventionist that are tutoring, that all of those supports are still going to remain, whether a student is in person or a student whether the student is in person or the student is virtual. So thank you for that clarification. Well, I know that we have several questions that we were not able to get to. One point that I do want to make is that we do have an FAQ. Many of the questions that have been asked and that you'll see throughout the Q&A, they are already on the FAQ. So I want to make it clear that we are consolidating some of these questions. Questions might be worded differently, but they're still asking the same thing. So we're making sure that we're consolidating these questions and providing those answers. We will update our FAQ with any new questions that are coming about. We're not going to repeat the FAQ questions because if you end up having too many questions in our FAQ and you really can't get to the information easily. So please know that we are consolidating. We're looking at every one of these questions that are coming through. We're consolidating them on our FAQ on our website and providing responses. And any new questions that are not already on our FAQ webpage, we are going to be including in that over the next week. So you'll have those questions updated there. I do want to thank each and every one of you for your time today, for joining us, for getting this information. You know, some of the key takeaways that we got from today is the fact that we are looking at those community health metrics to help us determine where we stand in regards to reopening our schools. And this is in addition to the staffing and the building capacity component, that when we reopen our schools, we're going to be reopening our schools with 2 days of in-person and 3 days of virtual. So that is something that we know will be happening. We're going to begin transitioning our students in January. That doesn't mean all students are transitioning in January. We have a full timeline. In the first group on January the 19th are our K-2 students with special needs who are part of our citywide program. And every week from then through February 16th, we will be transitioning additional students. So by the end of February, all students that are able to transition to in-person will have transitioned, all based on staffing, building capacity, and those community health metrics. But that is the process for this happening. And then finally, we need you all to complete the family choice forms, and you can find them in our Power School. And I hope that you will take some time to do that over the next week because this information is extremely helpful for us to solidify the actual schedules for your student so that they can know specifically what the transition looks like for them when we begin this transitioning process next month in January. So with that said, please continue to be safe, continue to be engaged, and also just to be involved in everything that we are doing. We value your input. We value your collaboration that you have been providing us. You have truly been our partners, especially our parents, throughout this whole global pandemic. And we're hoping that you will remain to be our partners. But enjoy the rest of your day.